So yeah, hello everybody. So Happy New Year, by the way. This is my first recording in the year 2023. I'm going to try to make it as short as possible because I think it's important for me to really watch out for the time. And today I'm going to be talking about brand strategy. And what I've done here is I've done a little bit of a slide that is trying to show you some of the key elements of what brand strategy would look like. And so I'm just going to try to do, sorry, I'm looking at my time. I'm going to try to do this in about 10, 15 minutes at the most. So there are 7 points that we have here in terms of what things that you should think about if you're running, you are actually working on a brand, you develop a brand, you own a brand. And I found that a lot of companies that are not necessarily product marketing companies do not think intentionally about these things because they think that their work will speak for them. So I think of like engineering companies, construction firms, well, banks, most of the companies that don't really deal with consumers on a daily basis, people who don't like, maybe they deal with distributors or they don't deal with the end users. They tend not to be as intentional about their brand strategy as they should be. But then what happens is sometimes when you then need to make some very high public, how would I say, investment decisions, or you need to attract certain kind of interest from certain parties within the world, you then find out, the value of having had a rich brand portfolio and, top of the mind presence in the market from people, because then the investors or whoever they may be will be looking to see what is the word on the street about this company, about this business, what are they like. They're literally going to listen to what any person would say about them, not necessarily what comes in from your board or from your company statements and that kind of thing. So the way we look at brand is this should be something that you should proactively preserve, because it's the brand encapsulates the value that the market places on your company. It's an estimate, it's a judge of the value that you have in terms of not just in terms of what you do, but how you come across, how you are received, the identity that you have, the credibility that you've attracted to yourself over time, and what people know about you. So it's that kind of intangible thing that you do not value the absence or the presence of it until when you need it. And unfortunately, when you need it, if it's not present, you cannot grow it overnight. You can't pay for it. You can't buy it. So it has to be something. It's one of those things that you grow over time. Very strongly linked to reputation. But the brand for a company, for an institution, even for a personality, if you're a celebrity and you're a brand in yourself, you need to have built it before time so that when you need it, you can use it either for investment purposes, either for reputation management purposes, either for crisis management purposes. So let's get into it. So the starting point, 7 points here, and I'm watching my time. The first one is the brand philosophy. What does your brand stand for? I would assume if you have a company, a business, or an institution, whether public or private sector, there should be a philosophy of your brand. What are your values? What are your ethics? What is the purpose of that brand, that entity, whatever it is? What are, these are things you need to really sit down and write. I always find people who say, oh, I work in a small company, or this is Nigeria, we don't need to do this. I have worked in both contexts, both locally within the country and outside. And I see that best practice is best practice. Mathematics is the same. Science is the same. Sociology is the same. It's just the local adaptation and interpretations that may differ. But the principles of math, the principles of science, the principles of business management are the same, regardless of where you find yourself. The principles of communications, human behavior, organizational behavior, performance management, and change, they are the same, regardless of the context. What differs is the cultural interpretation, the local context, but the principles rock solid. So therefore, you have a brand. There is a way to manage a brand effectively. If you are not doing it, you're not managing your brand. Let's just pack it. You may be making money, may be successful. You are flying under the radar. That's fine. Let's hope you don't get into trouble one day, or let's hope you do not need investment from people who are not interested in hearing only from you. And they want to hear from the market, they want to hear from stakeholders, they want to hear from the general public and from knowledgeable people. So fine, you need to have the values, ethics. Honestly, I don't know why people gloss over this. You need to very quickly and clearly let people know what you stand for. And that has to come through in your brand, in the way you project your brand, in the way your employees work and how they show. And what's the purpose of the the brand or the entity. That too has to be very clear. Then again, what are the attributes of your brand, your organization, or whatever it may be? What are you known for? What's your personality? Do you have a quirky personality? Are you formal? Are you known to be an intellectual brand? Are you a strategy or a consulting brand? Are you a operational excellence brand? What is the identity that you bring forward for people to know? What is the experience that people will have when they come in contact with you? And how do you transmit that experience in the kind of resources that you bring into your company and how they relate with third parties? Are you known for instance, your personality? Are you known for arrogance? Are you known to be a listening brand? Are you known to be a compassionate brand? Are you known to be an impactful brand? These are the things that you have to intentionally develop so that then becomes the basis for your employee management and all that kind of thing, and the values that you bring. I find that because a lot of companies gloss over 1 and 2, they, particularly in the local context in Nigeria, they create opportunity for what I would call anyhow kind of business. Because once you don't set it from the get-go, then anything goes. People then develop the personality. The organization develops a personality all of its own. It becomes unattractive. It can never attract the right kind of talent. That's one thing about brand, and that's the unspoken thing. There's some companies, for instance, that I would never work for. I'm sorry. And it's because of what I see, because of what I hear, and if you like reports, high things. I mean, your statement may be as high as ever. I would never work for you because the experience that your employees, what we hear that people that work for you say about you, I'm sorry, you can't attract people like me or people who are high talent or even more than I am. You know what I'm saying? So these are the things that go into a company that would like to attract top talent, that would like to be seen in a particular way. You intentionally make sure that you write these things out and that you model it out in your behaviors and the people that you employ as well. So 3, reputation. Reputation is about performance and behaviors. It's about what you do. First of all, you cannot be fundamentally, I've had people ask me questions, Shola, how can I improve my reputation? And I'm like, by doing the right thing. You can't be a trashy company or a institution that you don't do your job, as in your reason for being, you are lousy at it, and then you then think you have a good reputation. How does that work? So it starts off with performance. And I'm not a believer in spin, and spin doesn't work. Anybody that tells you that spin is work, let's just spin it. You spin yourself out of business eventually, because in this modern day social media world, spin does not work. All it takes is one of your employees to just do an anonymous email somewhere and say, this is really what's going on here. You're finished, you're done. You know what I'm saying? So do the right thing. I would imagine, when I see, my experience has been that the trouble and the effort that people take, companies, organizations, individuals, sometimes leaders take in spinning, if they had used that effort to solve their internal problems, it would have been much better. They would have gotten faster within a short time, because performance is within your control most of the time. The spin is outside of your control. Anybody that tells you they can control how people receive your messaging outside, particularly when you're not lying, when you're not telling the truth or you're misrepresenting, that person is a charlatan. The person is not being factual with you, or the person doesn't know what they're doing. It is you stand on much more solid ground when you are speaking what people can go back and verify. Verifiable facts stand the test of time when managing reputation. So performance, then behavior, how you come across. You may be doing the right thing, but then if your behavior is arrogant, nobody really cares. It's not. So there's a little bit about how you come across that also feeds into how your brand strategies. And again, your values. If you have values that says, I treat people with honesty, respect for people, and integrity, then that will show in your behavior, which is why I said the starting point, your number 1, is really in the value space. Then walking the talk. The worst thing that can happen in terms of reputation management is you have you're doubles tongued. So you say one thing, you do another thing, or do as I say, not as I do. Nobody wants to hear that. If you are caught out in it, it's going to seriously harm your reputation, and it will tie back to your brand, because people will remember the brand. And that's the thing. Positive reputation goes back to the brand. Negative reputation also goes back to the brand. And you do not have the leeway to say, okay, no, I only want the positive things going in, which is what people say. But I'm like, the negative things happen. It's part of your history. It has become a part of your story. So it will tack on. So it's better you walk the talk. Anything you commit to doing, make sure that you do it, and let your impact actually work ahead of your communications, not the other way around. And then make sure that your reputation is crisis resilient. That's what I was saying from the beginning. Because if you're doing a lot of good things and you're not even talking about it, people don't even know that you do those things, your reputation is not crisis resilient, because the attribution of your good works is not going back to your brand. So one of the roles that communications professionals have in your organization is to make sure that brand attribution, you secure it, you hold it. So it's not enough to do it. I'm sorry, in reputation management, your brand does not speak for you. Sorry, in reputation management, your work does not speak for you. You literally have to, speak for yourselves. You have to own your own narrative. We'll get to that in a moment. And then this then brings you into key messages. Every organization, institution, you should have a set of key messages, a message platform of your own that is consistent. Anybody that is talking about you, they must start from their top 2 or 3 things that must always be said about you. You build it. Nobody's going to build it for you. It's your narrative. If you allow other people to create a narrative for you, then I'm sorry, that narrative is going to define you, and it definitely will not help you achieve your objectives. And if it's a negative narrative, it will stick. So push your own narrative out, develop it, let it be in tune with your brand values, with your philosophy, with all the things that you wanted to achieve, your attributes, your reputation and all that, or how you'd like people to see you. Let it be targeted. Usually when we build a message platform, we start off with what we call the foundation messaging. This is who we are. This is what we do. This is our history. This is where we're going, our vision, our mission, all of that. Our context in the society, this is what we've been doing. This is what we believe. This is where we see ourselves going. This is how we partner. This is how we work. We call that evergreen messaging. Evergreen messaging because it's not likely to change. For instance, my brand story is that we set up in January 2020, set up by Sola Abulu, who is a communication strategist. We help brands, businesses, and organizations solve their problems through strategic communications, organizational effectiveness, and reputation and crisis risk management. So that's not going to change. That's who we are. That's our platform messaging. And then we build on that. For different audiences, we can be targeted, we can be tailored, we can also be differentiated, but the consistency of messaging, starting from foundation, then level 1, level 2, branching off to different groups. But there's no contradiction in any part of it. There is nothing that is not factual. There is nothing that does not tie down to the foundation, to the core of who we are. Someone needs to sit down and do it. When you have that messaging, anything that you're doing, whether you're doing a launch, you're doing some sort of, how would you say it, promo or whatever it is, you push out that messaging, it happens in that way, everybody sees it, everybody receives it, everybody knows that that's what you're saying. So that's one way of that then, and it all ties back to your brand again. And if you are intentional about this, then you know that anything that you're doing at any point in time, you push out that messaging, you make sure that people will always remember, particularly the evergreen messaging, and you find out that eventually people begin to say it and describe you that way. So your message goes ahead of you, goes again back to your brand. So this, of course, leads into your communication. So the question I would ask you, as a brand, as an institution, whether public sector, private sector, are you proactive in your communications or you are reactive? It's only when you want to do a press statement that you remember that there is media out there. Do you have a structured approach towards communications? Do you communicate internally? Do you have an internal communications plan? When you have transformation or change management things, or you're doing something that requires organizational change, is there a plan around it? Are there measurable objectives? Do you have smart targets? Do you have spokespersons? Do you think about how the audience is going to be received? Do you tailor your messaging? How do you ensure that communication flows through your organization in an orderly, in a structured and outcome-driven way? If you're not hitting your targets in any way, shape, or form, I can assure you, it's clear you don't have an internal communications plan, at least a strategic one. And then again, another thing is even if you have an internal communications plan, is it strategic or is it business driven or is it both? Ideally, it should be both. It should be a communications plan that enables you to achieve your organizational objectives as well as your strategic. So things like culture, things like how you want people to behave, things like vision, the vision of the organization, all of that should be pushed through in a very intentional and purposeful way. I have worked in an organization where we did this perfectly successfully. It is possible. It is the same way in which it is exactly how would I say, political parties or any sort of entity associations. That's how people, or movements, let's put it that way. Movements are able to gather people and move them in one direction. Even faith-based organizations, that's how they do it. It's through communications, but you build a shared vision. It's not you don't do it in one day. Over time, you structure it, you plan it, precept by precept, values by values, meeting by meeting, session by session, but there is somebody looking over that entire cascade period, and there's a goal you're trying to achieve. So, but again, this has to be very purposeful. So again, Number 6, we're almost there. Narrative. This is what is the narrative about your organization. I've worked with a few clients, and when you ask what's the narrative, and the people are fumbling, you don't have a narrative. You don't have a narrative about your organization. It is scandalous. Because what that means is that you can be anything anybody sticks on you will stick. Anything anybody labels you will stick. A narrative, you should have a narrative that is in the same way that you have money in your vault. There should be an ironclad narrative that you have written about your history, your legacy, who you are, how you want to be presented. It's not just about what you've done, but it's about how you want to be presented, because there's some aspects of information that you may believe is not really helpful. It's about what I want people to see at first. That's what you high grade. And then you may have a place where details become irrelevant, but that high-level narrative, you need to have it to hand at any point in time to bring out, the same way you have your financial statements out to bring out. The narrative should be there. There should be, when I find people getting confused about the narrative in the organization they work in, I really get, it just tells me that you are doing nothing about your brand. Your brand is dead as far as I'm concerned, because my goodness, you are open to the element. Anything can happen to you at any time. You are an accident waiting to happen. Finally, legacy. What do you want to be remembered for? It's important for every brand, even my brand, which is relatively young, to think about what your legacy will be, because that will then drive your number 1. And you see, that number 7 goes back again to number 1, which is why you have this in a circle. All of this is how you think about your brand. Why is it important to think about how you want to be remembered? Because you are building a brand that is going to last, hopefully to outlive you. What contribution do you want to give? What is the performance? Why? Because tomorrow you may be seeking to attract an investor who is concerned about what your environmental performance has been, what your social impacts have been, what your governance has been like. They may be interested. They are likely to be interested. If you're trying to attract money from certain parts of the world, they will need to know that. And most especially, even in the country where you are operating, these are questions that may become important at some point in time. So think legacy, think long-term. I think short-term thinking has hurt a lot of companies, because my question is, the only justification for thinking short-term is if you expect your company to exist only for that short-term period. But if you are building a company, or you have investments or debts that is going into 20 years, and then you are solving your problems or thinking 5 years, it's a mismatch. I don't understand. What is your game plan? Do you understand? Are you want to create a situation that will cause a crisis while you are still in play? No, you think to the level of what it is that you're building. But if you're a short-term person, you don't know whether you'll be here today, here tomorrow, well, fine. Perhaps number 7 is not for you. But if you're building to last, you're building a multi-generational or cross-generational entity or institution or endeavor or brand, you really need to think about the future. And that should guide how you think about your company, how you talk about your organization, how you work with your employees to ensure that they live out those values, and how you build your reputation all proactively. So thank you very much for listening and watching. I hope that was insightful for you. Stay tuned for our next video. Thank you. And please leave your comments down there. Subscribe to our YouTube channel as well. Let us know if this was interesting for you. If you'd like to hear more, just drop us a line and let us know. Thank you very much.